Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Leks.
Today we're talking about Altered Carbon Season 2. We're talking about the latest episode of Picard. And we are talking about the animated film Superman Red Sun. Let's get straight onto it. No beating around the bush. Let's talk about Altered Carbon Season 2.
Oh man, this was just a disaster. I really enjoyed Joel Kinnaman in Season 1, and I was really hoping we would see him again. We didn't, but we got Anthony Mackie, and when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is gonna be good. You know, he's a solid actor. I enjoy his performances. You could literally feel him acting in every single scene he was in.
He's not wrong, folks. He's not wrong.
And it was just painful to watch. I remember I was watching it, I got to episode 5, and I was just like, fuck! I'm only on episode 5. And I could not get into it the least little bit. The one bright spot in the entire season was the bounty hunter, whose name I can't remember. I enjoyed her more than Ortega as kind of like a foil partner for Tuck. Yeah, other than that, I didn't get into it. I didn't follow the plot. I got to episode 8 and I was just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. Yeah. I don't care. I'm just done.
Do you know what I find really interesting? I think we've come to the same conclusions by completely different routes, which I'm looking forward to unpacking. I'm someone that is so resistant to change. There's a restaurant not 5-minute drive from here. I used to go there for this beautiful chicken and scallop. It would come with fries. It would come with a little side salad. Salad dressing was delicious as well. It was a great plate of food, like £7, cheap, really good. I didn't go there for 8 months. Something different was happening in my life. I went back there. Whole menu was changed. Chicken and scallop was gone. They served croque monsieur and toasted sandwiches now. I never went back. I was devastated. I'm like that with TV as well. Give me Terrence Howard over Don Cheadle as Rhodey.
No, Don Cheadle was...
Yeah, I absolutely
such an
hate and loathe Don Cheadle so much. Mark Ruffalo, though, yeah, he's Hulk by all means. Love Ed Norton, but this guy's Hulk now. And then when you come up against a show like Altered Carbon, with the very premise is they're going to, every season there's going to be change, there's going to be change, there's going to be change. I was I'm concerned. At the end of last week's podcast, when we reviewed season 1, I said to Leks, I'm concerned. I'm excited, but I'm mostly concerned. This is why every new cast member and every new character was a downgrade. I felt we've gone from B-listers to C-listers or A-listers to B-listers, depending on your perspective. I honestly felt that they did so much world building in season 1 that was almost entirely thrown out for season 2. Harlan's world felt like in season 1 a world. It felt like we talked about Neo, etc. in cyberpunk stories, those big cityscapes, neon, flying cars, this, that and the other. They had the zero-G fights, they had going up to see the meths houses, their big structures, monuments, they built themselves up into the sky. Harlan's world in season 2 felt like a series of grubby back streets. They went to the woods once, that was it. All that beautiful world building was gone, and all those, not all well-developed characters, but better developed characters and better actors, I felt in general, were also gone as well. Okay, give me change. I accept the premise of this TV show. I'll embrace it. I'll get on with it. But in almost every way, it let me down. And the one word that I would throw at you for the season 2 is just disappointment. Huge disappointment. So much potential, and it's largely been kind of thrown away. Joel Kinnaman was so good. He was a cocky, arrogant. He's one of those smartest guy in the room, the most badass guy in the room. Anthony Mackie.
Not only that, but he played several characters in season 1 and did it effortlessly. Yeah. I was always in the moment with him. I never once thought, oh yeah, this is an actor portraying a character, portraying another character. That never crossed my mind. I was just with him 100%. Yeah. Every time I saw Anthony Mackie, I was like, there's Anthony Mackie.
Yeah. And Trip became Anthony Mackie at one point as well, and it was almost the exact same character. With James Bond, you don't see Daniel Craig and you think, oh, he's doing a Pierce Brosnan impression, or you know that everybody's going to bring something different to the table. And I know there's been a 30-year time jump, but this is now a Takeshi Kovacs that is a stoic. He's quite introverted, and it wasn't the same guy. I got so much less enjoyment from the character from Anthony Mackie's Takeshi Kovacs than I did from Joel Kinnaman's. And as a leading character, you just want that man or woman to be, beating the drum for the TV series. And I think, like you said, you could see the cogs turning. You could hear the acting. Talk to me about the 30-year time jump.
One, they covered the 30-year time jump in a completely throwaway line that you could have easily missed. I don't necessarily think they needed to pick up exactly where season 1 left off, but they kind of just threw us into what was happening now, where, Poe appeared in this other place and he was apparently, like, being held in a necklace that Tuck had. He kept glitching because of the attack in season 1. They'd apparently, like, spent loads of credits and been to something like 42 different planets, all in the search of Kel. And for me, coming out of season 1, what I was looking for was the search for Kel. And we didn't get that. Yeah. They did that off screen in between the seasons, and I was kind of let down that we didn't get to see that. The main plot line, which was kind of like a political thriller / drama thing.
Long story short, it was Governor controlling both sides of a war, playing them off each other to look like the hero when she diffused everything.
Yeah,
that was kind of it till episode 7.
Yeah.
And then the Elders came in, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that was the point. I was just like, fuck this, I don't care. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I watched episode 8, and I was just sitting there on my phone like, come on, let's get to the end of the episode, finish this season out. That storyline was much less interesting to me than season 1's storyline, which was very much character-centric, whereas this was very plot-oriented season. We didn't get as much of the envoy stuff. Like in season 1, Kovacs was making use of his envoy skills like pretty much every episode, and I found that really interesting. The concept of the envoys is fascinating, and I love that. This just felt like really piecemeal and like it was thrown together and nobody really thought about it, and compared to season 1, which felt so well planned out, so like perfectly paced, except for like the last 2 episodes, which I mentioned last week. I thought it would have been better as an 8-episode series, which they did for season 2. So season 2 is a lot of missed opportunities, in my opinion. It was a plot I wasn't invested in, with characters I wasn't really invested in, and the characters that I really did like felt different and less true to themselves.
Episode 1, I liked, truth be told. It dropped us into a mystery, kind of similar to the first one, and this guy called, was it Laxley or something?
Axley, played by Michael Shank, and I expected, because it was Michael Shank, to see him again. No.
We're dropped into this, again, kind of noir mystery. I need help, I need protection, and suddenly the guy who needs help and protection is dead. And at that point I thought, okay, they're giving us another noir mystery. I'm into that. We're in a cyberpunk world. It's different to Takeshi Kovacs. We're doing another mystery. Poe's going to be his sidekick. Maybe we'll discover new parts of Harlan's world. And then almost immediately with the introduction of Kel, and like you said, I would have liked the search for Kel. When Ray said to him last season, I've got her DHF or whatever, it's out there, I'll never tell you where she is. I kind of thought season 2 would be maybe the quest for Kel. We'd maybe bounce around some planets, we'd, do something like that, and then maybe season 3 was when they kind of came back together. But episode 1, the final moments of episode 1, we find her. What is she being mind controlled? Is she got amnesia? Does she have amnesia? And that was it. That was the story. Him being completely compromised because of his feelings for Kel, and so all the envoy stuff, all the badassery was just gone. And so we had this puppy dog, and she got a bit sick of the puppy dog herself. It was my mistake letting you in, and she kind of pushed him away. It was kind of a bit embarrassing for him. And that was Takeshi Kovacs, season 2. After all that building of the character in season 1, relegated to such a weak character in season 2. I personally think the best decision in season 2, you might disagree with this, was the reintroduction of Will Yun Lee's Takeshi Kovacs.
Yeah, I mean, he was great.
Absolutely fantastic. Stole every scene, and he was the envoy. He was the badass.
And even he was kind of confused about why Mackie's Kovacs was so obsessed with Kel. He was just kind of like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, obviously he didn't remember the relationship with Kel because he'd been backed up prior to Kovacs kind of joining the resistance. But you could see this sort of confusion of like, how did I turn into that? As an audience, we were sort of feeling that as well.
Yeah. Do you know what it honestly felt like to me? Takeshi Kovacs number 1 meeting Takeshi Kovacs number 4 felt like David Tennant bumping into Matt Smith.
Yeah.
The far superior model running into like a real inferior version of the same character. And sorry, I'm gonna stop laughing. When he threw Anthony Mackie off the cliff, I was so happy. I was so thrilled by that, and I actually in that moment thought, they're not doing it, are they? This is now becoming prime Takeshi Kovacs at the expense of Anthony Mackie's Takeshi Kovacs. And that they didn't, unfortunately. But that was such a great moment. Yeah, it was the story of him, they were double-sleeved and they used the OG Takeshi Kovacs, but we saw him kind of fall in love with Kel again in a very kind of natural way. She would talk about her kind of manifesto, her beliefs, and he was very reluctant to it in the beginning, but she won him over. And I just enjoyed seeing them fall in love again, I guess. And Anthony Mackie just stood there brooding in the corner, kind of arms crossed, like, that's my girlfriend, don't talk to my girlfriend. And again, I was pretty embarrassed with the character.
They have at the end of season 2 set us up for season 3. I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be perfectly honest. I think I'm kind of in an American Horror Story thing of, well, I'll give it a shot and maybe it'll be better, but I'm not really convinced it's going to be an improvement on this. And I think that's really a shame because season 1 was so good and so well made, and they really dropped the ball in season 2.
Yeah. I've written in my notes that I really liked episode 1 because they set up a noir detective story that ultimately we never got. I liked episode 6 because it was the introduction of the first Takeshi Kovacs, and that kind of playing off each other. It wasn't a cloning situation. It wasn't some kind of doppelganger. It was him. It was him before he met Kel in a double-sleeving situation. And watching his envoy skills as he tracked down the fourth Takeshi Kovacs was really brilliant. When he was able to kind of get inside, as she was called then, Dig's mind, it was very much a violation. But that was what he was. He was a ruthless protectorate, stopping at nothing to destroy his future version of himself, who had assumed had been, corrupted and was now out with the resistance. But watching that journey from him meeting up with them, I thought was fascinating. And that I would, season 3, if he was the main guy in season 3, I'd be thrilled with that, to be honest. So 1 I liked, 6 I liked. I did like the epilogue, and it made me think, can we just forget season 2? Because Poe is back to his full strength. Dig has become Annabelle. Presumably the hotel is going to have turrets again. The Nevermore will be much like the Raven was. I didn't really understand how Kovacs' DHF was written on a piece of paper and is now being reproduced, but that's a thing. The first Takeshi Kovacs is alive because they didn't put him in prison for double sleeving because Anthony Mackie sacrifices himself to save Kel. So I have confidence in season 3. Disappointed by season 2, but I'm hoping it's kind of a reset. That's all I'm hoping for. So 1, 6 and the epilogue. Go and watch 1, 6 and the epilogue. Is there anything you liked that you want to talk about?
No. I mean, and like my liking the bounty hunter is kind of a stretch, and it's basically down to I liked her storyline better than Ortega. She seemed like a stronger, more formidable character, more like somebody that Kovacs would team up with than Ortega, who was kind of, I don't even know how to describe her. I mean, she was an alright character, but her emotional maturity was kind of wobbly and went back and forth. Like, she wasn't consistent throughout the season, whereas I felt the bounty hunter in season 2, she had very consistent goals throughout, and she was kind of a badass throughout. She had her family, but she was also perfectly capable of holding her own in this milieu, and I didn't always feel that about Ortega in season 1. There were definitely episodes where I felt like Ortega was in over her head.
Won't get into it because I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you've said, but I didn't like the bounty hunter to the point where I almost feel like she wasn't necessary at all in the entire...
Oh, she wasn't necessary.
Yeah. Like, I would write her out almost immediately and have Kel, Takeshi Kovacs 1 and Takeshi Kovacs 4. She was like a more well-rounded character than Ortega, absolutely, but I would
the only function she really served was in episode 1 in getting Kovacs to Axley, and after that point she was completely superfluous.
Quick fire round, these are some of the things I liked. The Circle, where he fought against people from season 1.
That was actually a really cool concept.
I really liked it. Yeah.
The deal was that they would have these kind of convicts go and they would fight people wearing the faces of their loved ones.
Beautiful.
And Ortega was the first one, and Kovacs was kind of struggling against it, and then there was a moment when he realized it wasn't really Ortega, and then he kind of like just swept the floor with all of them.
Yeah.
But I mean that idea that like making people fight the people they love the most for survival, that I really enjoyed that idea.
I did, yeah. Kel's envoy test, where they posed her questions as she kind of deflected knives and bullets, just visually was stunning. It was so disappointing to me because Kel was so good in season 1, and her, story from episode 1 to episode 6, I just didn't really enjoy this kind of shell of her former self. But when she was back, I think this was like episode 7 or something, doing the envoy test, oh my god, it was like fighting with physics, kind of Brainiac, deflecting these bullets and knives while both Takeshis looked on like, that's the woman I love. That was a beautiful moment. The angel fire, really liked it. It kind of reminded me of Viserion, like flying his blue flame down.
I didn't like the angel fire.
Did you not?
It came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked cool, but like in terms of story and plot, it was kind of like, oh shit, these characters are absolutely fucked. How are we gonna get them out of this situation? Oh, something's gonna come flying down from the sky and they'll magically escape. And like, no, that's just bad plotting.
The form that the Elder took was the only thing about the entire Elder story I liked. It looked like a big kind of moth butterfly thing. Thought of visually spot on. And yeah, just Poe and Annabelle at the end, her taking name out of a Poe book and them kind of living together, these little AI couple now.
They did kind of have a sweet little story, the two of them.
They did, yeah. But ultimately just so fucking disappointed. I'm most disappointed about the fact that Harlan's world felt like a character in season 1 and it felt like a backdrop in season 2.
It's probably a good point to move on. Alright, so the most recent episode of Picard. Finally, they reached the Borg cube.
Finally. Yeah, I mean, not a great deal happened in this episode. The ship reaches the Borg cube. Picard beams across. Soji is turned into...
she's activated, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say Cyan Soji. And they meet up. Elnor beams across somehow, of exact perfect location in the cube, and does some awesome fighting and then ruins it by talking. Any other comments? I mean, as a Star Trek fan, how are you enjoying this show so far?
I'm enjoying it. I think this was probably one of the weaker episodes because, as you said, not a whole lot happened, and we've sort of been building up to this point in the season so far of Picard and Soji coming together, and most of the episode was Picard kind of being taken on a tour of the Borg cube and them trying to figure out where Soji was, because she'd kind of ended up in a secret area where she didn't register as actually being on the cube, and they were kind of like, well, she has to be here somewhere. But it felt more like a sort of nostalgia trip back to the Locutus days, and nothing was really made of that. I thought it would have been really interesting if they'd gone more into his life as a Borg and the ramifications that had on him. We got a little bit of that with 7 of 9, where she asked if he ever fully regained his humanity, and he admitted that no, he didn't, but every day he was trying. And I think they could have done some really interesting things with like a lot more flashbacks, a lot more kind of PTSD sort of symptoms. They showed us a little bit of his trepidation about being on the cube again. But essentially it was kind of, it had the feel of, somebody going back to their old high school and walking around and being like, oh yeah, I remember that. And oh yeah, I remember that. I didn't really feel that the stakes were in this episode.
We got, I think, like 4 episodes left. I mean, what would you like from the rest of this season?
I'd like to know more about Soji's creation and what her actual purpose is. Also kind of like what the Romulan spy is really up to. Because he's kind of a shifty character, but I think he actually genuinely does care about Soji.
Yeah. He told her his real name.
Yeah.
That seems to be a big thing, like Doctor Who.
There's the name you have for everybody. There's the name you have. There's your Romulan name, and then there's the name that you tell the person who has your heart, and that's the name he told her. So that was a really significant moment between the two of them, and shortly after that, he tried to kill her. So kind of resolving the conflict between the two of them, like I'd be really interested in seeing where that goes, because you also have his sister who's sort of pressuring him into killing Soji, and like why they're so invested in this particular individual.
Talk about their diabolical plan, because it seemed to be about accessing her dreams in order to gain a sense of who she was, where she came from. Was it some kind of Romulan meditation exercise or something? And
yeah.
She was walking along and...
Yeah, they kind of, sort of like hypnotism almost, except she had to walk through this path, and kind of like delve into her subconscious and pull things out. And this was kind of shortly before the spy tried to kill her and she got activated. I mean, it was kind of cool watching her like punch through the floor, but my thought was like, wouldn't it have been easier to punch through the door?
Did he think that would kill her? It seemed only to anger her. I mean,
yeah,
we
didn't
get the logic
really,
of that.
because he's been through most of the episode he was playing with this weird cube thing that was kind of reminiscent of a Rubik's Cube. Like, he solved it when he was with his sister, and it kind of did like a music box thing where this thing came out and did some movements, whatever. But he did the same thing when he was with Soji, and this like red gas started coming out. And it wasn't really clear what he intended to do. I mean, he and his sister did talk about, the point of this is to kill Soji. But the whole setup, like why did he seduce her? Why did he get into this relationship with her? If the ultimate goal was just to kill her, why do this kind of really roundabout way of doing it? And it just didn't seem like a very well thought out part of the plot. And I think we've commented on this in previous episodes that the cube scenes have been the weakest ones in the show so far, and I don't think having an entire episode on the cube really changed that dynamic.
Do you want to talk about Superman Red Sun?
Okay.
I think you can guess what happens. He lands in Ukraine instead of America, becomes an asset of the States. Basically a walking, talking Russia/communism propaganda machine. Saves Metropolis from a falling satellite. Where he says to Lois, all this American hypocrisy, you talk about the American dream, it's a lie. America being built by slaves, land was stolen from Native Americans. You have all this rhetoric about what the rest of the world is doing incorrectly, but you need to look at your front door.
Yeah, I mean, it was essentially like, forget all the bad things that the United States has done in our history. Here's this one bad thing that's happening in Russia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what did you think of the film as a whole?
I found a lot of aspects of it problematic. One is it's kind of the same old trope of, communism bad, capitalism good. Lex Luthor and Lois Lane are married, and he eventually becomes president, and he creates Superior Man, who's meant to go up against Superman, because Superman is just sort of over in the Soviet Union. I mean, he did invade Korea and kind of solve the Korean War problem, but he's essentially sort of staying in his own yard, doing his own thing. Diana is there as a diplomat. She offers to negotiate peace between him and the States. And then Superior Man just kind of comes crashing down into this ballroom and just wastes the place and starts this fight with...
Sounds weirdly familiar. I think I've heard that story before.
And starts this fight with Superman. We keep cutting back to Lex, who just keeps saying, more power, more power, more power, and literally explodes Superior Man. And we watch him kind of he mutates into this weird creature who's no longer capable of speech, and he's in pain and he's suffering, and Superman actually stops and is like, how can I help you? And he's really sort of compassionate towards this creature, and Lex Luthor just sort of murders him, which starts a conflict between him and Lois, who's like, you sent him out there to die, you tortured this person, and Lex is like, it's an it's not a he. And I just wanted to see Superman's limitations. He was never supposed to win, which is kind of a really shit thing to do, but a quintessentially Lex Luthor thing to do. But then they backpedaled on that, and like by the end of the film, Lex Luthor is a good guy, and it was just sort of like you can't reconcile those two things. Like, they were trying so hard to be pro-capitalism, pro-American exceptionalism, that it just lost all sort of common sense and logic. I think that the thing that bugged me the most, and I went to Twitter for this, and a few other, and Google and some other people who are familiar with Superman, is that the Red Sun storyline is always very distinctly anti-communism. And I was sort of hoping we would see Superman as the hero from a different point of view, rather than, the American exceptionalism Superman that we have. And we didn't get that. Like, it just reaffirmed the rhetoric that the American government continues to perpetuate, that communism is bad and the only good system is capitalism. And I just think there are a lot of problems with capitalism, and this was an opportunity where they could show the problems of capitalism and how it's not this hugely beneficial system where everybody, succeeds, and they didn't do that. They just went back into the same old narrative.
Would you have preferred to see Superman maybe win?
I would have liked to see communist Superman as a good guy. There's absolutely room for that story in the narrative. And, the iteration of Batman in this was just purely a bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, Batman killed people in this, Superman killed people in this. I can't remember if we saw Wonder Woman killing any people. But
no, Wonder Woman didn't kill anybody.
But
she's literally the only protagonist in this, and she was a side character.
It was unfortunate that her one thing was shaking her head saying men the whole film. That was like, she came across as quite one note, but like you said, she was the only rootable character in the whole thing. Batman was a terrorist, Superman was kind of a Stalin proxy. To be honest, in general, I mean, it's quite a juvenile thing to say, but I don't really like. This was essentially the Cold War told with superheroes, and I don't care for that. I don't want my genre being kind of sullied with war. War stories are told in different ways, but I just think I just didn't. It bummed me out a bit, if I'm being completely honest.
The thing that got to me is that it's 2020. This film obviously just came out. It started in 1945 and kind of went through to 1980. The timeline I found problematic. Mm-hmm. Lex Luthor didn't really age through the entire thing. Lois Lane got some gray hair. Lex lost his hair. That was kind of the only token to aging that they got over 40 years. But the thing is I don't. The United States is fucked. I mean, it has been for the past 4 years. The American government is doing a lot of bad things. And I think to come out with a film in 2020 that pretty much says Russia bad, America good, is very simplistic and out of touch with the current political atmosphere that we're in right now. And it would have been much more productive to have more of a critique on modern superpowers than, as you said, to replay the Cold War, essentially. Because we're past the Cold War. Other things are happening. It's a story that's been told a million times over again, and I'm definitely of the belief that art should be a critique of the society it comes out of. So that's what I wanted from this. I didn't want to be told Americans are the best nation in the world, and I mean, because at the end of it, basically the United States kind of took over the Soviet Union and became it was like a global entity rather than just one country, and it was just. It's
funny that that's their happy ending, when a lot of people around the world would consider that like an absolute nightmare scenario.
I consider it an absolute nightmare scenario, and I'm an American.
That being said, have you read the graphic novel?
I haven't read the graphic novel.
The graphic novel ends in a very different way. Lex Luthor, I can't remember the ins and outs. Lex Luthor lives 1,000 years. And at his funeral, we found out that this Superman is still alive. And then I think we travel billions of years into the future, where you find out that the House of El is the House of Lex's descendants, and Earth is Krypton. And at the end of that story, Jor-El sends Kal back to 1930, whenever the beginning of this film took place. And so there's this kind of inescapable nature of there will always be war, there will always be the destruction of the planet. It will never end.
That I would have been down for.
Yeah, it's a far better ending. And I, along with many people on the internet, had a look, are perplexed as to why this was the ending that we were given. And this is the American ending, rather than the maybe slightly more sci-fi, that's a real thinker, I'm going to have to think about that kind of ending. I don't know when the graphic novel came out, maybe within the last 15 years or something, but I'll never apologise for loving the sight of Batman beating 7 bells out of Superman, no matter what versions of them we get. It was the old red sun lamp trick, and he beat him to a bloody pulp. I also enjoyed the kind of old school Green Lantern squadron, which posed a lot of questions, because that's not quite how they work. You can't replicate the ring, and I presume they didn't have a whole chest full of rings, but
there were a lot of things in this film that were not exactly the way it works.
Yeah,
like I had a problem with the Berlin Wall. They had this narrative where Superman was going around solving all of these conflicts, like the Korean War, and then it was just like, okay, in this world, why does the Berlin Wall exist? Presumably, the Soviet Union had expanded over quite a lot of territory, but why specifically the Berlin Wall? Because that's very distinctly related to World War II and the conflict between the Axis and the Allies. you know, surely Superman would have stopped the conflict or interfered before we got to the point of building the Berlin Wall, but it was kind of just a minor thing that bothered me. It didn't make any sense.
I would say watch this film. It makes not a lick of sense, and it's basically war propaganda or American exceptionalism propaganda.
Definitely that. I mean, like, I finished watching it and I texted you and it was just like, I want to scream.
I was into about Act 3, which happens to be watching at the exact same time. But yeah, I mean, is it not the gag that Superman has always been propaganda for America? That's the thing, though, isn't it? I mean, it's not. He's never not been that, I've always felt.
I think that's the problem I have. As much as I try, he always rubs me the wrong way, and it's this kind of super idealized version of the U.S. and what it means to be an American, and the U.S. is always the good guy, and I mean, fuck that.
He's never allowed to lose, and that's boring as hell.
It is,
because that means America
boring.
Is losing. A graphic novel released today where Superman loses and it's symbolic for what's going on in the world right now would be fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It'll never be written.
I want that story, and I was hoping that this would be that story, and it just wasn't. So I wouldn't recommend watching this.
I would recommend it for the people who maybe like bizarro takes on, you know, comic books. I know, you know, we had Elseworlds in the Arrowverse. So this is a little bit different, but it's a complete failure. There is nothing redeemable about this. I found out that a version of Superman where his pod lands in the UK exists. It's not being turned into a film or anything, but I'm certainly going to have to read it.
That would be interesting,
just
to see how that goes.
Yeah. Next week, Westworld, Season 1.
God, you realize, like, this week has been a complete failure in terms of what we watched. Like, nothing was good.
Yeah, I like Takeshi Kovacs #1. That was my highlight of the whole week, truth be told.
Yeah, I think I was just disappointed all around. Not happy with this week of television.
Yeah, I think it's Westworld Season 1 next week, but we're also doing Devs Episode 1, which I'm really looking forward to. I think that's going to be, like, there's not much, nobody's talking about it at the moment, but I think that could be a real hit.
Well, we'll see next week when we come back to this.
See you next week.
See you next week.